I married Daniel believing I had found a man who loved me for who I was. His family appeared warm and welcoming, though I always sensed an undercurrent of control behind their smiles. They owned a large construction business, and from the beginning they treated me less like a daughter-in-law and more like an accessory to Daniel's life. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just their way. But slowly, their real plan unfolded. Shortly after our wedding, Daniel's parents convinced me to help with their finances. They told me it was tradition for new family members to invest in the family company. They pressured me to sign papers, claiming it was routine bookkeeping. Daniel assured me it was safe. The documents they handed me were confusing, but they pressed until I signed. Soon after, I discovered my savings had been transferred into a joint account for the business. I was furious, but Daniel insisted his parents would reimburse me. He promised this was temporary. Weeks later, I learned from a friend who worked at their bank that my name had been added as a guarantor on a huge loan the family had taken out. If the business failed, I would be responsible for the debt. That's when I realized the truth. They had trapped me financially. They had never needed my help. They just needed a scapegoat. I began digging quietly. Late at night, while Daniel slept, I combed through every document in our house. One folder stood out, a thick, cream-colored envelope labeled pre-wedding contract. Inside was a signed agreement between Daniel and his parents. It stated that any spouse he married would be made financially liable for the family's debts to protect their own assets. It also detailed how Daniel would lure me into signing family contracts under the guise of tradition. My stomach churned as I read my own name in the notes. They had planned this before I even walked down the aisle. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I made my own plan. Using the contract as leverage, I met with a lawyer. We discovered the documents I'd signed were full of irregularities and, because of the hidden pre-wedding contract, could be deemed fraudulent. The lawyer helped me quietly separate my finances, freeze joint accounts, and gather evidence. The final blow came at the family's quarterly shareholders' meeting. They had invited me under the pretense of welcoming me officially to the business. I arrived with my lawyer and a representative from the bank. While Daniel's father boasted about their future profits, I slid copies of the pre-wedding contract across the table. The room went silent. My lawyer explained the fraudulent scheme and announced my immediate withdrawal from any financial liability. Because of the deception, the bank froze their credit line and launched an investigation. Daniel's parents tried to blame him, but the contract proved they were all complicit. They lost their access to the business's emergency funds and were forced to liquidate assets to cover the loan. Meanwhile, I filed for divorce, using the contract to demand a settlement that returned every cent they had taken from me plus damages for fraud. Daniel begged me to reconsider, claiming he'd been forced by his parents. But I reminded him he had smiled while handing me the papers. I walked away from the marriage with my savings restored, my credit unscathed, and the family exposed. Months later, I heard their company had collapsed under the weight of legal fees and unpaid debts. I didn't rejoice openly, but I felt a deep, satisfying calm knowing they could no longer prey on anyone else. I started over in a small apartment of my own, free from the trap they had set, and this time no one would ever make me sign anything without reading it again.